give us leave. The Prince of Wales and I must have some needful conference alone.
I never really acknowledged that I was going to have to play Shakespeare. As an English actor, that's part of the vocabulary of your life. And I couldn't admit to anybody that I didn't get Shakespeare.
I know not whether God will have it so, that in his secret doom, out of my blood, he'll breed revengement and a scourge for me to punish my mistreadings. Tell me else.
I'd seen Gielgud as a young man. I'd seen him play in The Winter's Tale. We'd come up to London from my school in Wales during something called the Festival of Britain in 1951. And the history master, was a man called Tyvion Phillips, came over to the queue and said, what are you going to... We had dispensation to catch the midnight train back to Wales, those of us who were senior boys or girls. And we were all going to see Richard Attenborough and his wife in a play called To Dorothea's Son, a light sort of English comedy. And Mr. Phillips came up and said, what are you going to see, boys? We said, well, we're going to see To Dorothea's Son. He said, well, Keith won't like that. He'll want to see John Gielgud. I said, he's not, I don't think he's in anything. He said, yes, he is. He's in The Winter's Tale. Let's go and see if we've got a seat. So we got a seat. I was in a terrible time. I wanted to be with my mates. And we were going to meet at 10 o'clock at Lyons Corner House in Leicester Square before we went to get the train home. Well, the seat I got was very good. It was in the top of the gods, the upper, right up there, but right in the front row, in the middle. And there I was in my school blazer, really hating the whole idea. And I didn't want to see John Gielgud or anybody. And the curtain went up and he was on stage, directed by Peter Brook. Wonderful cast, Diana Wynyard and Flora Robson. Anyway, Sir John said his opening lines, too hot is kissing with inside lip nothing, then I am nothing, Bohemia is not. I mean, I was blown away. I understood it as easy as if it were Treasure Island, if you like. I couldn't believe it. I had left the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art with a bronze medal, and my fellow students were Alan Bates and Peter O'Toole and Albert Finney, and their careers were shooting ahead, but I wasn't doing very much. And I was washing dishes, in fact, when Chimes, I didn't know anything about it, but I was washing dishes in this restaurant at the top of the Haymarket, and one of the other waiters, who was also an actor out of work, said, Orson Welles is in town, and he's putting together a production based on Shakespeare's Henry IV histories. He's looking for actors. He's seen girls today, and tomorrow he's seeing boys, men. So I called a number, and I was told to be at the New Theatre at, what time was it? Oh, yes, at 12 noon. And when I got there, there were lines of actors coming out of the stage door, out of the front of house, all the way down St. Martin's Lane. And I finally got on stage at 3 o'clock. Orson apologized. He was a huge star at that time. And the thing I experienced that day for the first time was how much he loved actors. And he said, what are you going to do for me? And I said, I'm going to do a piece from a play by Emlyn Williams. I think he was thrilled that I wasn't doing Shakespeare. Said so many boys doing Shakespeare all day. I did my piece, and he came down to the front of the stage. He was standing in the audience, and he said, well, actually, he said, it's been a great honor to listen to you. Would you play Prince Hal? Well, you can imagine. I'm often asked how much the text of the movie resembled the text of what we played in Belfast and Dublin, and essentially they were very similar. Our dress rehearsal in Belfast was catastrophic. There were no union laws. We didn't expect, I mean, at 2 in the morning, we'd only reached the sort of interval Every time there was a sound cue, when trumpet should be sounded, you heard people cheering. When people cheered, there were horses. I mean, it was just catastrophe. And Orson found, God knows where he found in Belfast at 2 a.m, hot chickens, and he remained very calm. And I went back to my digs and said to Thelma Ruby, who was playing Mistress Quickly, I said, what is going to happen tomorrow? And she said, rag'll go up and rag'll come down. And by a miracle, the next day, all the sound cues were in the right place, and we thought we'd had a great triumph, and we were thrilled. I was especially thrilled because Orson acted with me so beautifully. He liked me, so his wife, whom he adored, and daughter had not arrived in Belfast, and he was lonely. And so he asked me, would I have supper with him? And then I had supper with him every night. And we had been quite a success in Belfast, financially, and the Belfast newspaper. When we got to Dublin, we were absolutely, whatever the word is, lashed by the critics. But he was totally unfazed by that. And on the Sunday that we were going to catch the ferry back to England, I was getting more and more depressed because I knew I would be out of work. And I went up on deck, and the boat pushed out from Dunleary, and it was drizzling, and it was miserable. And I was getting a real Welsh mood of melancholy. My future seemed nothing. And suddenly I smelt this cigar, always the signature tune. And about 4 foot away from me was Orson, leaning over the rail and saying, you'll get over this. It doesn't matter. And he said, it was wrong. He said, to try and condense the tapestry of those two great plays was wrong. And he said, what it is, it's a love story. And that's what I want to make. It's a boy torn between two father figures, one whom he reveres, but whom he cannot love because his father has blood on his hands, and the other father figure whom he adores but cannot revere. And that is the story of the film. It'll work as a film, and I will make it as a film. And he said, I will never do it unless you play Prince Hal. You know, people say those kind of things sometimes. They don't always mean them, but Orson did. I arrived in Madrid, October 1964. I took a taxi to Welles's apartment, and the door was pulled open by Mrs. Rogers, Orson's secretary. I had met Mrs. Rogers, Anne Rogers, when we were doing Chimes at midnight in Dublin. She was his secretary, really until he went to America, I think, towards the end of his life. She doted on him, and she was an extraordinary secretary. She knew all the secrets, where all the bodies were buried. She was as, close as a clam about it all. But she was wonderful. Anyway, so here I am arriving, and there's Mrs. Rogers, who I'd seen in Dublin, and she yanked me into the kitchen and said, the film's been cancelled. Said, but I booked you an evening flight back to London tonight. And I was just reeling. So I was in the kitchen with Mrs. Rogers when I suddenly heard this great roar of laughter. And I thought, well, that doesn't sound as though this is bad news. And suddenly the door burst open, and in came Emiliano Piedra, the young producer, and his co-producer, and Orson. And Orson said, we're rolling. And Emiliano Piedra said, welcome, Dr. Livesey. And I said, and anyway, and Orson said, well, let's go and have a lot of good-hearted shaking of hands and everything. And they left, and he said, come on, let's go and have lunch. Paola's made this wonderful lunch. So we went across to have lunch. And I said, what was that about Dr. Livesey? He said, well, I didn't tell you, but you're going to play Dr. Livesey. or I've told them that I'm going to make Treasure Island, and you're going to play Dr. Livesey, and Sir John is going to play the Squire in it. And I said to Sir John, no. He said, no, I don't think we ought to tell him, do you? So well, I was in a daze, arriving, the film off, now it's on again, and having this Treasure Island. So the next morning at 7 o'clock, I got into the car driven by his famous chauffeur, Patrizio, and Mrs. Rogers in the back and we drove across Spain. And the next day we arrived at Alicante. And on the quayside of a little side dock was the Hispaniola, which was the boat that had been used in Billy Budd. Orson had persuaded the producers, before they smelt a rat, that he could make Treasure Island. It would all be on location. The island could be Ibiza. All he needed was a tavern for the Admiral Benbow Inn. And that tavern, if they could give him that tavern, he could use that for Chimes at Midnight, because all of Chimes at Midnight was also going to be on location. So we arrived at Alicante, and there is the good ship, the Hispaniola. And they're the producers, there's champagne, there are people, everybody's in, this is going to be the first shot of Treasure Island. And Orson was there. I think the actor Tony Beckley was the only, he was on board playing Israel Hands. And after a while, Orson said, is everybody ready? And he said, yeah, si, pronto. He said, action! And a great sail was unfurled down to the and Orson said, cut! Well, I never saw any other shot. And then we all had champagne, and Orson said, come on, let's go. And so he and I and Mrs. Rogers, driven by, we drove up north from Alicante to a tiny little beach place called Calpe. I'm sure now it's Miami Beach. It was simply heaven. There was only one hotel overlooking the sea, and I had a swim, and then we ate supper out of doors on the terrace with candlelight. And it's the only time that Orson talked about Chimes at Midnight, about his dream. And what he wanted to make clear, because most audiences think, because it's Shakespeare, that Shakespeare was writing about a contemporary episode of their life, but there wasn't. And he wanted to try and make it clear that what Shakespeare was celebrating was the loss of this, if you like, merry England. It was an England of castles and forests, a smaller population, a different dynasty. All that had changed. Specifically, he felt in war, particularly, that war could not be considered romantic, as it is considered romantic in Malory in the Tales of King Arthur. War was bloody and awful, now had become that. And you see the beginning of that in the great battle scene. But it couldn't be decided by events of chivalry. He said, I want to call down the corridors of time with this film, Keith. Mrs. Rogers, of course, was blubbing quietly into her red wine. The course of shooting of the film was entirely dependent on the arrival and departure of the screen stars. I mean, there was a kind of repertory company of Wells and me and Poins, to a certain extent Hotspur. But first of all, he had to shoot Gielgud, because he had him only for 3 weeks before Gielgud was going to do Tiny Alice on Broadway, the Edward Albee play. Then Margaret Rutherford arrived and Jean Moreau, and we did all the scenes with Jean Moreau, and then the scenes with Margaret Rutherford. And, of course, my respect for Gielgud was immense. There's never been an actor in Shakespeare like him, ever. I mean, just beautiful to listen to.
And in that very line, Harry, standst thou. For thou hast lost thy princely privilege with vile participation. Not an eye but is aweary of thy common sight.
And I had this scene with Gielgud, and we were alone in this great hall, and he accuses me of going to be a traitor.
Harry, for all the world, as thou art to this hour, was Richard then, when I from France set foot at Ravensburg. And even as I was then, is Percy now. Now by my sceptre and my soul to boot, he hath more worthy interest to the state than thou.
Do not think so. You shall not find it so.
And I start this speech, do not think so, you shall not find it so. Oh, stop. Oh, I'm so sorry, Orson, I'm so sorry, Keith. And Orson said, no, it's fine. Oh, I'm so sorry, Keith. I said, what's the matter? He said, well, you're not observing the iambic pentameter. And he said, you must breathe. Shakespeare gives the actor time to breathe at the end of every line. You must always breathe at the end of the line or at the punctuation. If you break it up, it's not Shakespeare. And what is the point? We're doing Shakespeare. I'm so sorry, Orson. I said, no. He said, you see, Keith, if you do that, when you're speaking Shakespeare, you will find it's like being on a surfboard, and it carries you. Shakespeare's genius will carry you through the way you say, well, gold dust.
It makes me sin in envy that my Lord Northumberland should be the father to so blessed a son. A son that is the theme of honour's tongue, whilst I, in looking on the praise of him, see riot and dishonour stain the brow of my young Harry. Oh, that it could be proved that some night-tripping fairy had exchanged in cradle clothes our children where they lay. Then would I have his Harry, and he mine.
In the film, I don't expect an audience to necessarily get this, but all the royal scenes are in iambic pentameter. All the scenes with Falstaff are prose. Falstaff never speaks poetry in the play. Gielgud never speaks anything but poetry.
Rebellion in this land shall lose its sway, meeting the check of such another day.
Falstaff, you are going with Prince John of Lancaster against Northumberland.
There's not a dangerous action could keep out his head, but I'm thrust upon it. Well, I cannot last ever. But it was always the trick of our English nation, if they have a good thing, to make it too common.
Well, Falstaff, the king hath severed you and Prince Harry.
Yes, I thank your pretty wit for it.
People often ask me what it was like being directed by Wells. I can't think of any specific direction, acting direction that he gave me, or that he gave anybody. I mean, Gielgud had played in recite the wonderful Henry IV speech, "How many of my thousand subjects are at this hour asleep? Oh, sleep what?" And it was shot 2 days before John left. And so we were in Cardona, and Orson set it up and said, you know, I'm lighting you through this barred window, and there's your light, and go whenever you want to. So John did that whole speech, and at the end of it, the crew all applauded. I don't think they'd ever heard an actor speak so long without interruption. And Orson was thrilled and said, we have to do it once more for safety, because you're going to Broadway in 2 days' time to do the Edward Albee play. So we have to, oh, yes, I can do it again.
How many thousands of my poorest subjects are at this hour asleep? Oh, sleep, oh, gentle sleep, nature's soft nurse. How have I frighted thee that thou no more wilt weigh mine eyelids down and steep my senses in forgetfulness? Why rather sleep liest thou in smoky cribs, upon uneasy pallets stretching thee, and hushed with buzzing night flies to thy slumber, and in the perfumed chambers of the great, under the canopies of costly state and lulled with sounds of sweetest melody.
And we had these incredible lunches out of doors when Sir John was there, which was early October, when it was sunny in the daytime, and a big table was spread, and we would all eat there. Sir John, who was a terrific anecdotalist, and Orson loved John talking about the theatre, and we loved listening. I mean, there was laughter. I don't know how I convey this, that it was such a happy film. The lunches would go on for hours, and then somebody would come back and say, Senor Welles, we are ready, and they'd clear the table, and Orson would put his cloak on the table and climb up on it and fall asleep. And then suddenly he'd wake up with a and right, vamonos, and they'd go back to work, and we'd all be wandering around doing the crossword. The only problem was there were no lavatories, so you just wandered away and found somewhere. And Sir John always wore his crown, and you'd see the crown glinting as he wandered, and he came back and said, oh, I found a lovely little place, but there were 4 nuns squatting there, so that was the only sort of light. But then we'd get the Senor Welles is ready now, come back, and we'd go back and work. And we worked hard.
Shall I not take mine ease in mine inn, but I shall have my pocket picked?
You owe me money, Sir John.
What is I lose, Jack?
Wilt thou believe me, Hal? Some 40 pounds.
What?
And the gold seal ring of your grandfather's worth some 40 mark.
You owe mine hostess money, Jack. You lost the reckoning. Item, a capon, 2 shillings and 2pence. Item sauce, 4pence. Item sack, 2 gallons.
I think he must have known, maybe he didn't, the similarity between Falstaff and Orson Welles, not just the physical appearance, the greediness, the loving of food and wine, but more than that, he was always looking for a buck. Falstaff I'm talking about. He had to duck and dive to get the means to live. And Welles, the money that he made, he spent it on the films that he wanted to make. And you felt that was so much that Falstaff in real life had to do, whether it's by robbery or whatever. And I think the identification between the character of Falstaff and the character of Orson was absolutely, peerlessly exact. The other thing, they were both noble in their character.
And as melancholy as a jib cat or a lug bear.
Sir John, you're so fretful you cannot live long.
Why, there it is. I'll tell you what I am about.
2 yards and more.
Indeed, I am in the waist, 2 yards about. But I'm now about no waist, I'm about thrift.
Once he said we were driving to location, the film is much sadder than I thought it was going to be. He said, it's not as funny as I thought it was going to be. It's romantic. He said, I like the robbery and that sort of cathedral of trees with the leaves falling. But overall, he said, it's not comic. It's not a comic film. Perhaps in his heart of hearts, it was the film that he wanted to make. After all, the very first note of the film is elegiac. We have heard the chimes at midnight.
Jesus, the days that we have seen. Ah, Sir John, said I well?
We have heard the chimes at midnight, Master Robert Shelley.
That we have, that we have, that we have.
Finally, it came to the point when Orson said, we'll shoot the Renunciation tomorrow. So they were lighting it, and we went away and sat in that little chapel somewhere. And Orson said, well, we've come to our goodbye. Says it's been a long time since Belfast. And now it's goodbye, really. And I knew what he meant. It was goodbye in the film to these Prince Hal and Falstaff, and it was goodbye to Keith Baxter and Orson Welles. I don't mean that in a melodramatic way, because of course we would see each other again, although the times we did see each other again were very few after this day. And he said, it's a very wonderful speech, this speech that you've got, but he said, just say it. He said, you may feel because of the emotion of our friendship and the friendship between Hal and Far, you may feel that you are getting emotional and that tears. He said, no, that's fine. I wouldn't choose tears. Well, I did the speech and I didn't cry. And he's right, it's much better.
God save me! God save me, my sweet boy!
Have you your wits? Know you what 'tis you say?
My king! My Joe! I speak to thee, my heart.
I know thee not, old man. Fall to thy prayers. How ill white hairs become a fool and jester. I have long dreamed of such a kind of man, so surfeit-swelled, so old, and so profane. But being awaked, I do despise my dream. Make less thy body hence, and more thy grace. Leave gormandizing. Know the grave doth gape for thee thrice wider than for other men. Apply not to me with a fool-born jest. Presume not that I am the thing I was. For God doth know, so shall the world perceive, that I have turned away my former self. So will I those that kept me company. When thou dost hear I am as I have been, approach me, and thou shalt be as thou wast, the tutor and the feeder of my riots. Till then, I banish thee on pain of death, as I have done the rest of my misleaders, not to come near our person by 10 mile. For competence of life, I will allow you, but lack of means enforce you not to evil. And as we hear you do reform yourselves, we will, according to your strength and qualities, give you advancement. Be it your charge, my lord, to see performed the tenor of our word.
If I had to put into a choice of some of the most remarkable things I've ever seen on film, in performance, it's the look of Welles as he's looking up at me as Falstaff. There's incredible pride that, look, this is my boy. Look what he has become. And also hurt and pain. I just think it's an astonishing piece of work. I think, of course, it's acting. Of course we were acting. But it was certainly underpinned by a very, very serious emotion. I mean, it had turned into an extraordinary friendship.